When I arrived at my sister-in-law's wedding, there was no seat for my husband and me. I hoped it was a mistake. There's no seat for us, I wanted to confirm. Really, there wasn't. My sister-in-law smirked. My hopes were dashed. She did it on purpose. Oh, forgot about you too. I was speechless. I had been happy, thinking maybe we could get along better after the wedding. I'll get seats ready right now. Don't bother. That's their mistake for coming without an invitation. The groom tried to prepare seats, but my sister-in-law stopped him without any guilt. Thank you, David, but it's really okay. From now on, I don't consider us family anymore. The groom, who knew nothing, wasn't to blame. Shall we go home? Yes, let's do so. Now that we're no longer family, there's no point in staying here. We turned our backs to the venue and started to leave. Just then, "Isn't that Dorothy?" I turned around at the familiar voice. Whoa, Aunt Patricia. It's the voice from someone I had known since childhood. My name is Dorothy Anderson. I'm a 27-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband Thomas, who is the same age, for 2 years. We live peaceful and happy days together. My in-laws and relatives are all kind people, and we get along very well. Having grown up in a single-parent household, I knew no blood relatives other than my mother. Ever since I lost my mother 3 years ago, I felt a deep loneliness. That's why I'm so grateful to my husband for bringing such a warm family into my life. He is also a calm and kind person. However, there's one person who doesn't see me as family. My husband's sister, Nancy. Hello. Sorry to intrude. Whenever I visit my in-laws, even when I greet her, she completely ignores me. She doesn't even look my way. At first, I thought she just didn't notice, but it's every time, so it's deliberate. Nancy and my husband have completely different personalities. Nancy was good at studies, but was competitive, strong-willed, and selfish. She always has to be the best at everything. My husband, being her younger brother, was even better than her. Moreover, he is kind and very gentle, so he was loved by his parents and relatives since he was little. Probably because of that, Nancy has disliked him since childhood. As the wife of her younger brother, she must see me as enemy. Since our first meeting, she has seen me as a rival. She didn't even attend our wedding reception. She stood us up without any notice. I can never forget the empty seat next to my mill. Now, Nancy is getting married. Even though we don't get along, she is still family. I want to celebrate this occasion. One weekend, my husband and I brought a gift and went to my in-laws' house. Please, come in. Nancy, who came out of her room at Mill's request, was in an unusually good mood. It was the first time she greeted us voluntarily. Congratulations on your wedding. Congrats, this is a gift from us. It's a set of glasses. Nancy glanced at the box my husband handed her, then sighed deeply with disappointment. Glasses. I appreciate it, but I like to match my glassware with the same brand. If you leave them here, someone else might use them, right? Nancy didn't even try to receive the glasses we had carefully chosen. With no other choice, we placed them on the table. Her mood was good, but her personality was just as bad. But this was sort of expected. Are you having a wedding party? I asked, trying to change the subject, and Nancy answered happily. Of course, you know who I'm marrying, right? Nancy's fiancé is the heir to a major company. I had met him once here, and he seemed surprisingly gentle and timid, not like someone who would be with Nancy. I remember feeling a strange sense of familiarity when I met him. I was not sure why such feeling comes up. That's right. Your fiancé is the son of a major company president, so you must be having a grand reception. Have you chosen the venue yet? Nancy looked even more pleased with my words. As the future president and his wife, we're going all out. We've booked a top-class hotel in the city. There's so much to decide. It's overwhelming. I'm so busy, I can hardly keep up. I understand. The time before a wedding is really busy. We went through the same thing with all the meetings and fittings. It's really tough, isn't it? I tried to empathize, but she didn't like that. What? Don't compare us to you. After that modest wedding party of yours, you think you understand. Don't make me laugh. The scale is completely different. The scale. Despite standing us up, she had the nerve to call our reception modest. I thought it, but didn't say it. Nancy quickly returned to her usual grumpy self and went back to her room. She was in such a good mood. I'm sorry. Should I apologize? Just leave her be, seriously. You never know what'll set her off. We shared a wry smile. And then, the day of the reception came. Nancy will surely look beautiful. I wonder who will be there. I'm also looking forward to the food. I woke up early and felt excited all morning. Thanks for being happy about such sister's wedding. It's a celebration. Bad feelings just fade away. Wearing the dress I had prepared for this day, I got into the cab with my husband. Looking up, I saw a beautiful clear sky with not a cloud in sight. When I was little and cried, my mother, who passed away 3 years ago, would always take me for a walk. I remember holding her hand, looking at the sky, and singing together until my feeling gets better. She called the clear blue sky the sky of happiness. Today is a fitting day for a celebration. Such a lovely day. I was filled with happiness, ready to celebrate from the heart. But that feeling was soon shattered. When we arrived at the hotel, the families exchanged greetings in the waiting room. The groom's relatives were noticeably few. It seemed his father had never been in the picture. His mother was running late due to work. The groom's uncle mentioned she would make it just in time for the ceremony. He said he was the son of a company president, right? Since his dad isn't around, his mom must be the president. A female CEO, that's impressive. Even on her son's wedding day, she's working. CEOs really are busy. Speaking in low voices, we headed to the venue. Without looking at the seating chart, we tried to find seats near my in-laws. Relatives should be seated together. But there were no seats. Strange, there aren't any. Yes, none over here either. Could it be a mistake? I'll go ask. My husband checked the seating chart and went to ask a staff member, looking puzzled. When he came back after a while, he was angry. They said the seating chart was made according to the plan, and they confirmed it with them beforehand. So they're going to ask my sister again. Could Nancy have done this on purpose? No way, she wouldn't go that far, right? No way, but she might. Nancy and the groom came with the staff to check. What's the problem? We're busy. The two were already in their wedding attire. Nancy looked so beautiful in her dress that I was momentarily mesmerized. I hoped that the lack of our seats was just a mistake. I didn't want to believe that such a beautiful person could do something so mean. Well, our seats are missing. I wanted to check on that. Oh, they weren't there. She smirked. My hope was shattered. She did it on purpose. I forgot about you too. I was at a loss for words. I felt pathetic for thinking we could get closer because of the wedding. I was overwhelmed by sadness rather than anger and tried hard not to cry. I'm sorry for the oversight. We'll prepare seats right away. Seeing the groom's frantic reaction, it seemed Nancy acted alone. No need. My husband firmly refused. Yeah, no need, if you want to stay. Just grab a chair and sit somewhere over there. Nancy pointed to a corner of the venue. No, thanks. You can dislike me, but Dorothy has nothing to do with this. She came to celebrate from the bottom of her heart, and you treat her like this. I won't forgive that." My husband's words made my tears, which I had been holding back, start to flow. Oh my, such a devoted husband. I've always hated that goody two-shoes act of yours. It's really annoying. If you don't like me, that's fine. But you shouldn't have dragged Dorothy into this just because she's my wife. I don't like Dorothy either, acting all sweet. Who knows what she's really thinking? From the beginning, no seats were prepared for us. My in-laws, flustered, apologized to us and asked the groom to arrange seats. All right, I'll get seats ready right away. Nancy shamelessly stopped the groom again, saying, "Don't bother, you weren't even invited, so it's your fault for coming." Indeed, the invitation never arrived. I assumed we didn't get an invitation because our attendance was a given, but we weren't invited at all. David, thank you, but it's really fine. From now on, we don't consider ourselves as family. The groom, who knew nothing, wasn't to blame. It's a shame. I thought we could have been good in-laws. The kind-looking groom could only apologize. As for family, I don't want it either. Cutting ties is a relief, but it's a pity for you. If we stayed family, I might have benefited from David. How can someone think like that? Nancy must see the groom the same way. I felt a bit sorry for him. Shall we go home? Let's do so. Since we're no longer family, there's no point in staying here. We turned our backs to the venue and started to leave. Just then, "Isn't that Dorothy?" I turned around when I heard someone call me. Sorry. The voice belonged to a face I had known since childhood. Aunt Patricia. Aunt Patricia, who had lived next door to us in the apartment when I was little, was standing right in front of me. "It's been so long since we last met, Dorothy." We hadn't seen each other since I moved when I started junior high, but Aunt Patricia and my mother had stayed in touch. We reunited 3 years ago when my mother passed away. After crying in front of my mother's portrait, Aunt Patricia talked to me about her. "Your mother took such good care of me, Dorothy. I can honestly say I wouldn't be here today without her." Aunt Patricia had become a single mother at a young age. Because of that, she was disowned by her parents and raised her child all by herself. It must have been incredibly tough. My mother, who lived next door, treated Aunt Patricia like a little sister. Since my family was also a single-parent household, the 4 of us often had meals together. Since my mother was a kindergarten teacher, she could take me with her to work at the same kindergarten. That's how we managed to get by. Aunt Patricia, whose child often got sick, had to frequently take time off from her part-time job, making it tough for her family. So my mother never took any money for the meals we shared with Aunt Patricia. Even when Aunt Patricia tried to pay, my mother would just laugh and say, "Pay me back when you're successful," and wouldn't accept it. Our family wasn't well off either. But that was just how my mother was. Turning that promise of repayment into something like this, "I'm sorry it's so late." Aunt Patricia said my mother was her lifesaver, and tried to place a thick envelope of money on the altar. I thought about what my mother would do if she were alive, and decided not to accept it. After a bit of back and forth, Aunt Patricia gave in. "You're just as stubborn as your mother." I get it from her. I remember Aunt Patricia smiling happily. She left a note with her contact information, telling me to reach out if I ever needed help, and left reluctantly. Since then, I've only sent New Year cards but never mentioned my marriage until now. Knowing Aunt Patricia, if I told her about my marriage, she would plan a big celebration. So, to keep my marriage a secret, I continued sending New Year cards under my maiden name. And now, Aunt Patricia is here at the venue. "Why are you here?" "Why, it's my son's wedding." "Your son?" Come to think of it, Aunt Patricia's child was a boy a year older than me. He was timid and shy but incredibly kind. I remember being stronger and almost like a big sister to him. I always protected him from naughty friends. What was his name again? David. What, David? Is it really David? I confirmed the groom's name. David Moore. That's right. The boy's name was David. I never connected the surname Moore because Aunt Patricia and I always called him David. Yeah. The groom, suddenly called by his first name, looked puzzled. I'm Dorothy. I live next door in the apartment. Do you remember? The groom quickly remembered and brightened up with a smile. Dorothy. The boy I played with and ate with every day as a child was standing right in front of me. The feeling of nostalgia I had when I first saw him made sense now. Hey, what's going on? Explain this to me. Nancy, not understanding what was happening, was clearly annoyed. We're childhood friends. Dorothy lived in the same apartment as me back then. It's so nostalgic. Childhood friends, her. Her mother took great care of us. She saved our lives, and you're treating her daughter so badly. Aunt Patricia glared at Nancy, who turned pale. Having arrived a bit late, Aunt Patricia had been watching the commotion from a distance, not preparing seats for the couple, and doing it intentionally. Such a terrible thing to do to two nice people. She was angry and was about to step in when she recognized me. Dorothy, you got married. It's so secretive of you to keep it from me. I hurried to introduce my husband. This is my husband, Thomas. We've been married for 2 years. I'm Thomas Anderson. I've heard about you from Dorothy. It's a pleasure to meet you. My husband greeted her. I thought so earlier, but he's a wonderful person. You should have told me sooner. Because if I told you, Aunt Patricia, you would have thrown a huge celebration, even if it was hard for you. Of course I would. A huge, huge celebration. But it wouldn't be hard for me. I'm a CEO now, you know. The sudden revelation left me stunned. But Nancy's fiancé is a company president's son, and that son is David, which means, Aunt Patricia, you're a CEO. That's what I said, isn't it? Aunt Patricia laughed happily. Through hard work, the company she started had grown into a major corporation in just 1 generation. I remembered her rushing to pick up David late at night when he was staying at our place. She must have been on this path even back when she lived in the apartment. But putting that aside, what should we do about this wedding? What do you mean? Do you think I would trust my precious son to someone as nasty as you? Honestly, David, you should have seen through this. Nancy has perfect appearance, especially as she was set to become the wife of a company president's son. She must have worn a thick mask to achieve this. Knowing how cunning Nancy is, it must have been easy for her to deceive kind-hearted David. But now, she had taken off that mask herself. Wait a minute, there was a reason I didn't prepare seats. What reason could there be? She just didn't like us, that's all. I couldn't stand Dorothy's attitude towards my parents. She said my mother's cooking was awful and threw it away, and she deliberately broke my father's precious bonsai. It was terrible. I didn't do any of that. She lies so easily. My poor parents couldn't even speak the truth. It is heartbreaking. The one lying is Nancy. How could she come up with such lies so effortlessly? I was too shocked to say anything. That's why I didn't prepare seats. I wanted my brother and his wife to attend. If she were a normal sister-in-law, that is, but she isn't, so I did it for my parents' sake. Enough of this. Aunt Patricia's voice echoed through the venue. You might fool David, but you won't fool me. If you insult Dorothy any further, I won't forgive you. Nancy seemed taken aback by Aunt Patricia's fierce demeanor. I know Dorothy's kindness. She's strong in her sense of justice and hates wrongdoing. She used to help us all the time, right, David? Agree. She always helped us. Dorothy was our heroine. David smiled nostalgically, his expression unchanged from the past. Just to be sure, has anyone here ever been wronged by Dorothy? Aunt Patricia asked the in-laws and relatives. As everyone turned to look at me, I looked back at each of them. They all shook their heads and smiled warmly. Their smiles made me feel relieved, and I started to cry again. See, Dorothy hasn't changed at all. Nancy still seemed like she wanted to say something, but Aunt Patricia interrupted her. So, what will you do? Are you really going to go through with this wedding? The person David wanted to marry had just shown a side of herself that she had never revealed before. It must have been shocking, and he probably couldn't process his feelings yet. After a while, David looked up and glanced around the venue. I feel sorry for all the people who came today. What are you talking about? Everyone came here wishing for your happiness. If it's a marriage where you can't be happy, they won't mind if you cancel at the last minute. Aunt Patricia slapped David's shoulder hard. Do you think so? Ignore anyone who complains. You don't have to associate with people like that in the future. David had already made up his mind, but he couldn't say it, thinking about the guests. It was Nancy who grew impatient with David's silence. No one wishes for others' happiness. It's said that misfortune loves company. Right, if you cancel now, you'll be a laughingstock for life. You'll regret it. Her words seemed to push David. If I get married, I'll regret it. What? Wait a minute. You're saying you want to cancel the marriage. After coming this far, you're saying you want to cancel. Do you understand what regret means? I do. I don't want to regret it, so I'm canceling. What? Nancy's demeanor changed drastically at David's words. What are you saying? Do you think you'll ever be able to marry someone else? Have you looked in a mirror? Your only appeal is your mother's company. Even if I stay single forever and become a laughingstock, my life will still be better than marrying you. I'm glad I found out your true nature before we got married. You're calling it off at this point. Do you think you can just do that? I'll sue you for damages. What exactly is Nancy seeking for? She has no one but herself. No family, no David, no Aunt Patricia. Just herself. That's why she doesn't care who she hurts or makes miserable. It's best not to get involved with her. It might be late, but I'm glad David finally saw through her. Suing for damages, it's too demanding and greedy. You think that will fly? Breaking off an engagement requires a valid reason. Your pathetic son couldn't see through me. Do you think that's a valid reason? I see indeed, my pathetic son is at fault. Aunt Patricia seemed to be enjoying the situation. Then pay up. I'll settle for $100,000. Pay it now. That's quite a demand. Typical range for breaking off an engagement is more like a tenth of that. Want to go to court? It'll cost you time and money. For Aunt Patricia, this must be like a game. It wouldn't hurt her at all. Shut up, just pay me. I'm not like those bottom-tier female employees at our lousy company. You can't just break off an engagement with me. The venue buzzed with murmurs, and as I looked around, I realized that guests had gathered. Among them were the bosses and female employees Nancy had insulted. Nancy, everyone's listening. I tried to calm her down, but Nancy was beyond control. So what if they are? What's wrong with telling the truth? They're probably laughing inside anyway. We don't need them anymore, so they should just leave. Nancy's boss began to address the crowd, and soon, people who seemed to be from the same company left the venue, looking disinterested. My in-laws followed, apologizing. My husband and I joined them, apologized deeply. Our relatives, showing understanding and support, left without any complaint. David went around apologizing to the people who had come for him. Not a single person blamed him. They encouraged him to find someone nicer next time, and laughter filled the air. I'm sorry it turned out this way. I didn't think parents should get involved in their children's marriages, and I was busy, so I only met Nancy once. Aunt Patricia said. My husband shook his head vigorously. No, it's my sister's fault. I'm glad David didn't end up making an irreversible mistake. I apologize for her many rude remarks. After saying this, my husband called a taxi for his exhausted parents. They felt responsible for their daughter's failure. I was angry at Nancy for causing this. I'll handle the rest, so you should go home and take a rest. It'll be all right, my husband said. I watched as Mill nodded weakly and got into the taxi, then returned to the venue. Nancy was alone. Everyone is just so confusing, she shouted. Nancy couldn't understand other people, and probably would never forever. That's fine if you don't understand. We don't need you anymore, so leave. By the way, Dorothy, did you say your husband's name is Thomas? Yes, it's Thomas. That's a nice name, and he's a fine young man. You have good taste, Dorothy. My husband scratched his head, looking embarrassed. Even I felt a bit shy. I like him. I'd love to have him in my company. Would you come work for us? Me. Who else? Aunt Patricia seemed serious. If you don't mind, finish up your current job and then come join us. My husband looked at me. His eyes were asking, what should I do? I had no reason to stop him. So I smiled and nodded. Thank you. I'll do my best. It was an immediate decision. Even though nothing specific was said, my husband must have trusted Aunt Patricia. My husband has the ability to trust people, something Nancy completely lacks. Maybe that's why they were drawn to each other. I'm counting on you, Aunt Patricia said as she and my husband shook hands. Wait a minute. How did this happen? Why are you getting a job at a big company? I was supposed to be the next president's wife. Why? Nancy still couldn't accept it and tried to break their handshake. Enough is enough. This is the last time you'll have anything to do with us. I don't want to see your face again, so never show up in front of us. Aunt Patricia pushed her hand away. Finally, David spoke to Nancy. Let's end this. We'll discuss the details through our lawyers, so please go home for now. Seeing Aunt Patricia and David's calm and composed demeanor, Nancy finally gave up and sank to the floor. Her wedding dress spread around her, looking forlorn. I couldn't help but look away. Aunt Patricia is amazing. I had no idea she was the CEO of such a big company. She didn't tell me when we met 3 years ago. I was unable to watch Nancy any longer. I deliberately changed the subject to something brighter. Well, you kept your marriage a secret too, Aunt Patricia said, and I stuck out my tongue, saying, Oh, that's true. My husband and David laughed. Isn't it impressive? I worked hard, but I couldn't have done it without Dorothy's mother's support. I'm so grateful, and it hurts that she left before I could repay her. I intended to bring up a cheerful topic, but I ended up making Aunt Patricia cry. Remember the promise about paying it forward. From now on, Dorothy, you'll be the one to receive it. Thank you. But I've already received more than enough. It meant so much to hear you say you'd never forgive anyone who insulted me. That is more than enough. You're wrong. I'm the one who's happy. Truly, I'm so glad we met again. Aunt Patricia cried so much she could have wrung out her handkerchief. She'd always been warm and tearful. After the reception, Nancy, who had planned a honeymoon, just took those days off as she had requested and returned to work as if nothing had happened. Her resilience was almost enviable. Good morning. From today, let's work hard with a fresh start. There were no words of apology. No one responded to Nancy's deliberately cheerful greeting. Why are you all being so considerate? I don't care about the wedding being called off. You don't need to worry about it. Just act like usual," Nancy said as she calmly sat down and started working. Susan, one of her co-workers, replied, "You might not care, but we do, after all. We're the bottom-tier female employees of this lousy company." Nancy hurried to cover up. "Oh, you're holding a grudge over that. I just said it in the heat of the moment. I didn't mean it. Don't take it so seriously, right, boss?" The manager, whom Nancy tried to rope in, continued working as if he hadn't heard anything. Still undeterred, Nancy tried to talk to other employees, but their responses were minimal, and some openly showed their annoyance. "Is this some kind of harassment? Are you trying to drive me out? It won't work. What happened to your plans for a happily ever after retirement? Are you going to stay at this lousy company instead?" Nancy had her reasons for clinging to the company she had once insulted. Having lived at home without any hardships, she couldn't empathize with others. The day after the wedding party was called off, her parents kicked her out without any support, saying she needed to learn to stand on her own. Ultimately, she couldn't resist. They told her to take it to court if she wanted more, but Nancy didn't have the resources. The money she got as compensation would quickly disappear, covering her move out of the house. To live on her own from now on, she had no choice but to work. The thought of having younger seniors if she changed jobs was intolerable to Nancy. So, she couldn't afford to quit her current job. "You want to stay at this company, don't you? You don't want to leave, right? You want to keep working with the bottom-tier female employees at this lousy company." At that moment, Nancy's face turned red, and she clenched her fists. Abandoned by her parents and isolated at work, Nancy now lives resiliently despite everything. She probably thinks admitting loneliness means losing. But this is a lonely and impoverished existence, far from the life Nancy had envisioned. Since then, my husband left his previous job amicably and joined Aunt Patricia's company as promised. Aunt Patricia has a good eye for talent. My husband quickly got promotions and thoroughly enjoys his work. Seeing him so lively makes me happy every day. And now, I'm carrying a new life inside me. When I shared the news, my husband-in-laws, Aunt Patricia, David, and all our relatives were overjoyed. After the baby is born, I plan to stay with my in-laws. The house feels much more comfortable without Nancy. I can relax as if it were my own home. Today, Aunt Patricia, David, my husband, and I are having dinner together. When is the expected date again? Mid-May. I can't believe Dorothy is going to be a mom. This time, make sure to tell me. Okay, even if you try to hide it, I'll find out from Thomas at the office. I won't hide it anymore. I want a big celebration. That's the spirit. Everyone laughed. I wonder if my mother is watching over me, seeing how happy I am. Looking up at the sky, it was the sky of happiness,